prepared remarks. And currently, the only thing I'm doing, which happens to be wonderful, is I'm the historian for the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame. And I find that so enjoyable because we get letters from not only all over the country, but in some cases from Europe. That it's pretty cool. I could live in the storeroom there where the charts of the great races are. That's how gone I am on this particular subject. Anyways, you know, this summer, in just a few weeks, will mark the 154th season of formal organized thoroughbred racing in Saratoga Springs. And I phrase it that way because there was racing here before the recognized date of August 3, 1863 at the Saratoga Trotting Course, which was across Union Avenue from the present day track. So if we started with 1863 and went all the way through, this would be meet number 159. Those races having occurred at what we call Horse Haven today, the name for the old Saratoga trotting track of about 7 furlongs. I'll digress several times in this presentation, and this is the first. Back in the 1980s, the then New York Racing Association decided to make part of that, possibly the oldest property in Saratoga in New York, maybe only succeeded by Phoenix Handicap in Lexington, Kentucky. They decided that they would pay part of it over and make it a way for buses and cars to park on the other side of the track. I stormed into the resident manager's office and got absolutely nowhere. Anyways, the 5 missing years, 3 shutdowns account for the missing 5 years, and that's basically the topic today. They were in 1896, 1911 to 1912, and 1943, 44, and 45. And in a few minutes, I'll go into each a little deeper. There was a recorded flat race at the trotting course on September 16, 1847, which stands as the first one that we know about. The races of 1863, sponsored and supported by the remarkable John Morrissey, were so successful that he and 3 other men purchased the land that is today's Saratoga Race Course and had it ready for the summer of 1864. Morrissey was joined by William R. Travers, John Hunter, and Leonard Jerome, the last named the founder of Jerome Park Downstate, the grandfather of Sir Winston Churchill. They paid $100 per acre for 125 acres of land, where you and I go to the races today. In 1865, the Saratoga Association for the Improvement of the Breed was incorporated. It was the organization that was the forerunner of the present-day New York Racing Association, formed in 1955. This was an important development, as the association was recognized in New York law as the owner and operator of the track. The first of the 3 interruptions, the aforementioned 5 years, occurred in 1896. There was no racing at all. With the influential Morrissey at the helm, Saratoga racing had prospered into the 1880s. He and his successors made continued improvements to the track. These improvements, along with Southern racehorse owners who wanted, made that needed, to race up north in the wake of the destruction of the Civil War, were good for Saratoga. Another side trip. My favorite race is the Alabama Stakes. It's named for a Southern Confederate named William Cottrell. And William Cottrell supported Saratoga racing during the 1860s and immediately after the war. And August Belmont, the man in New York racing at the time, wanted to thank him for coming up north and supporting the races. And he said, "I'd like to have the Cottrell Stakes named for you." And Cottrell is alleged to have said, and I know he said it because I found the quote after about 35 years of research. Thank you very much, but I wish that you don't name the race for me, but name it for my poor and bleeding state of Alabama. So I think that's really cool. That's why it's my favorite race. Anyways, the number of racing days under the Morrissey years and then into the 1880s peaked at 40 in 1882. The association in those days held what they called extra days of racing. This is kind of an interesting concept. There were 3, 4, or 5 at this time. And after the official end of the meet, the association determined that there was still enough interest to race more. And so on these 3 or 4 or 5 days, they gave all of the proceeds to Saratoga Hospital, Saratoga School District, all the local charities, all the local churches. And it didn't last long, but it was a part of the scene at that particular time. Change, though, from these good days was coming. A new track in New Jersey, Monmouth Park, began to siphon off some Saratoga horses. Monmouth opened in 1870. Their owners, understandably, found it easier to remain in metropolitan New York and New Jersey rather than travel up to Saratoga. As a quick aside, that's a bit of an issue right now for the coming meet, due principally to the cost of transportation and fuel, and there are some horsemen really dealing with that particular thing, those who ship daily from downstate. In 1890, a racing man and track owner named Gottfried Walbaum gained control of Saratoga and soon alienated many people with his emphasis on gambling. Mr. Walbaum also angered downtown business merchants who had developed a nice relationship with the track over the years. The track had a post time of 2:30, which allowed tourists and racing fans to shop downtown and have lunch before going out for a day of the races. Walbaum decided to move the post back to 11:30 and offer lunch at the track. His bookmakers, those taking bets, did not have the reputation of the established group of the association, and so everything came to a halt. Controversially, in 1896, there was simply no racing at all. And Walbaum, by the way, he did some very good things for Saratoga, but he was not a man of good reputation, and there were a number of races that he won under his name, and it was pretty suspicious as to how the race turned out. Not that racing has a problem with tough races. City leaders in Saratoga were so angry with Walbaum, found this interesting, that they tried to figure out a way to tax him out of existence. When they couldn't do that, they actually had meetings to talk about building a new track somewhere else in Saratoga Springs. So, did not know that. When racing returned in 1897, there was much less of it than before. The meet had been cut from 28 to 22 days, and not long before that, it had been 40. Also during the Walbaum period, there were years when the great Saratoga races like the Travers, the Spinaway, and the Alabama were periodically not run. In November 1900, the track, and quite possibly the community at large, were rescued by one William C. Whitney, who led a syndicate that purchased it from Mr. Walbaum. Mr. Whitney immediately set about to restore Saratoga's prestige and standing in American racing. I could talk for the rest of the day about what he did alone from 1900 till his death in 1904. We have the Oklahoma because of Mr. Whitney for openers. He spent a fortune buying it. He spent a fortune doing improvements. Whitney returned the Travers, the Spinaway, and the Alabama to their rightful place on the Saratoga calendar, and he played a major role in getting great patrons of the turf such as John Sanford, August Belmont, and others to build private barns at the track. Some of those barns remained private until the sale of the track. Whitney added important 2-year-old races in 1901, like the Saratoga Special and the Adirondack Stakes. The new group, though, could not stave off the legislative blackout of racing that occurred in 1911 and 1912, when once again there was no racing here. That followed about 5 to 10 years of anti-gambling sentiment in the state legislature, and actually in many legislatures around the country. So it was kind of going to happen eventually, and Saratoga hung on pretty well, but those 2 years there was no racing. Some of the regular Saratoga owners traveled to Canada to race at tracks in Toronto and Montreal, and some went to Maryland where a new track, Havre de Grace, was built in part because of the troubles at Saratoga. Some board members of the Saratoga Association were actually on board of Havre de Grace. And, you know, this business of traveling around at the time, particularly going to Canada in 11 and 12, I asked my uncle Sylvester Veitch if he remembered much about those years. And he and three other brothers were all in the game. And he told me, he said, all that I can remember is we would start in Toronto in the spring. And we'd be tossed into the car and we'd drive from Toronto to Montreal, stopping every third or fourth day, all of us just sleeping in the car and getting out and having a race meet at all these little places along the way, Devonshire, Ottawa, etc. We got to Montreal in July, and then we drove down to Saratoga for the summer meet, went to Maryland in the fall at Havre de Grace, and went all the way back up to Toronto before the next year, 1911, 1912. They were tough. Anyways, when racing returned to Saratoga in 1913, a long period of prosperity and high racing class returned for about 30 years. All-time greats such as Regret, Romer, Sir Barton, and Exterminator raced here. And it was during this period that top owners such as Greentree, C.B. Whitney, George D. Widener, Alfred Vanderbilt, and Colonel E.R. Bradley raced here every summer. The third and final shutdown of Saratoga racing was in 1943 to 45, when World War II travel restrictions resulted in our races being conducted at Belmont Park downstate. Racing returned here on August 5th, 1946. And again, a little pause. I was told by a person who worked at the track at that time that, Mr. Veitch, if you look this up, you'll see that many speed records were set in 1946. I looked it up and he was right. So why, Ernie? Well, it's very simple. When they didn't race here for the 3 years, the US military stored tons of equipment right on the track. So when the war was over, the track had been compressed down to possibly almost concrete style. So there were all these track records, and one of them lasted, I think it was lucky draws, a very, very long time. Okay, back to the return of racing. 1955, oh no, skip that one. During the shutdown, our races during World War II were raced at Belmont Park. The racing returned here on August 5th, 1946, as I said. And in 1955, the association was formed with an act of legislation. Interestingly, I would have lost this bet 1,000 to 1. The votes in the legislature to create NYRA were very close. In the state assembly, the NYRA bill passed 77 to 63, with a necessary minimum being 70. And at state senate, it passed 31 to 23, with the necessary minimum being 30. So they were one vote away possibly for not taking over Saratoga. A lot of opposition at the time came from the sources of the owners downstate. There had been rumors for a long time that if the new association is formed, they're going to sell one of the downstate tracks. Now, at that time, there were three. There were Aqueduct, Belmont. Do you know the other one? No, downstate.
Oh, downstate?
Yeah. There was a third one, a really big one downstate. That's Trotter. Jerome was gone. Jamaica was the third one downstate. And the Wood Memorial had been run there for a while. And a lot of owners and trainers loved Jamaica. It was on Jamaica Bay. They loved the condition of the track. And they were convinced that when NYRA was formed, Jamaica was gone. It was in a few years. So that's why we have the three tracks today. NYRA, when formed, then set about purchasing the property of Saratoga, Aqueduct, and Belmont, and Jamaica, which they sold. At Saratoga, there were 31,661 shares of association holdings that were sold at $102.50 per share. One of the biggest owners, you had to be my age to remember this, one of the biggest owners of our shares was the Harry M. Stevens Concession Company. They were very big and they owned a lot of Saratoga. In 2008, NYRA surrendered its ownership of the tracks, including Saratoga, to the state of New York in return for an extension of its franchise to 2033 and the forgiveness of its debt. It was pegged at about $130 million. A franchise, for lack of a better definition, is a contract with the state to conduct racing. This franchise has regularly been a source of controversy. The terms of it were not necessarily meant to have NYRA run Saratoga in perpetuity. At that time, when the last franchise was legislated, there were lots of lawmakers who wanted to, in fact, get other people interested. You may remember the bidding process that took place in the 1990s and early 2000s to see if Saratoga should be operated by another entity. I will respect the confidence of that time, but I will tell you that two of the very biggest names in racing, even today, wanted to bid on Saratoga and buy it. Really big names. Didn't happen. The bidding became a moot point in 2008. So for better or worse in my view, the nation's oldest existing racetrack, nurtured and founded by folks like John Morrissey, William C. Whitney, Stephen Sanford of nearby Amsterdam, August Belmont, C.B. Whitney, and other patrons, 2008, it now became the property of New York State. Those are my prepared remarks. Questions? Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I saw, it was interesting that you said that they ran 40 days.
Yes.
Because we recently, I think 5 years ago, went up to 40 days.
That's right.
And as a kid, I remember that I think they used to run here just 3 weeks in August.
4 weeks in August, yeah.
It was 4 weeks.
24 days in August, yeah.
Okay, so it was at 1.4 weeks just in August.
Yeah, well,
And
go
so
ahead.
my question is,
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that 150 years ago was also 40 race days. So what do you think the effect is of this quote unquote extended season? Because it really didn't go up in race days. You have 5 days a week instead of 6, like you said, and so on. And then I hear certain discussions that since they get 300 at Belmont in the beginning of July and they get 30,000 here, they probably move it to July, all of July and all of August, ending in Labor Day. So what do you think the effect of these changes have been over the years, and what do you think maybe the possible future change would be?
Well, a couple of clarifications, and then I'll answer that directly. Prior to 1955, actually prior to like 61 or 62, we did have the 36 days of racing, but 12 of them were run at Jamaica, and then the remaining 24 were at Saratoga. That's the birth of the 24 days of August in Saratoga. But the Saratoga Association owned as many as 40 days of races for a long time. You have to register with the state to get the dates. So they own them. Now, what do I think of today? Personally, I don't like 40. But I say that from a different point of view. There's no question that the 40 is probably better for the economy of the community. There's no question that it brought more people in racing to buy homes up here and be here from April to November because the Oklahoma is available. But from a purist point of view, the quality of racing is not what Saratoga used to be. I'll put it that way. But having said that, there's no way that anybody wants to remain downstate with racing in front of an empty grandstand. I mean, it still matters who goes to the races. I mean, there's a few places left in this country. I haven't been to California, but Keeneland is spectacular. Churchill is spectacular. Woodbine's big days are spectacular. There's energy when, 30,000 people are at the track. But as quality of racing, if I were the czar of racing, I'd give Saratoga 6 weeks at 5 days a week. Good question. How about another one?
What about the July bid, extending it another 2 weeks?
Probably going to happen. I don't have as many sources as I used to have when I was writing. It's too natural to ignore July 4th to Labor Day. And downstate, both Aqueduct and Belmont are going through a real reconstruction period. Belmont, I think tragically, it may not be a 1.5 mile track when it's all done. The Islanders hockey team has the option to buy a lot of their land they're going to. I hope I'm wrong about the 1.5 miles, but to be fair to the people in charge, have you been to Belmont?
Yes.
It's a cavern. It's nice when there's 60 to 80,000 people there, but this gentleman is right. If you go down there, for the races, Belmont Stakes will be good, but on a regular day at Belmont, there are 300 or 500 people there. And, you look at this massive plant and you wonder, why are they, why is it there? So I'm afraid that the great grandstand and clubhouse are going to be knocked down in some fashion. Aqueduct, as you may know, is actually owned by Genting. It's owned by the Genting Resorts World Company. They have been pretty good to racing down there. In fact, they're the reason purses are fairly healthy in New York. Purses are a lot better in Churchill Downs and Oakland than they're in New York. I guess Aqueduct's days are numbered. There's a lot of old-time horsemen who, if you said to them, given your choice, which track downstate would you close, more of them would say Belmont than Aqueduct, although the established theme is that Aqueduct has to go, bad neighborhood, casino, I've been Aqueduct dozens and dozens of times. It's great. And the horsemen are going to be upset about it because they really believe the track at Aqueduct is a better track than the one at Belmont in terms of safety.
They sold the bonds to Home Depot.
It's all gone. They don't even have training there. Oh, that's right.
So
it's tragic.
How would you just have one?
Yeah. No,
bonds.
it's gone.
Yeah.
Sadly. But for the horseman's point of view, they got rid of the wrong track. That's unfortunate, even though Belmont is majestic.
So do you think this extension is good for?
No, I don't think the
You don't
extension is
think
good.
it's
I
good?
don't, no, I don't. I think that, a couple comments, too much ice cream is not good for you. And, people who still tune into racing care about quality. And the other thing that I noticed when I was working, which is up until a couple of years ago, and if you go, you'll see it, they have these long days, they've got post back maybe now to 6:10 versus 7:10. But if you just go stand outside the gates after the 5th or 6th race, people are just leaving the track by the hundreds, if not thousands. And they got their Saratoga thing, and we're happy that they did. It's not like the 24 days. But I'm running uphill on that one. It's the truth. Good questions. Others? Yes?
So is eventually New York State going to turn it over into private ownership?
Never going back private. No. NYRA itself is a private corporation. They elect their own board, okay? But they are legally leasing the track. I think it's $1 a year. But the state owns the properties, and I have never hid my unhappiness at that. Because eventually what they want to do, they will do. And I hope it's for the good of racing, but as a racing fan, it pains me to say that we're not the most popular sport right now. And I hope it's a really good season this year, but I don't know. There's other factors besides that. But I really believe 40 days is too long. And boy, those 24-day week meets packed with class. But it's a different crowd today, so that's okay too. It's a great experience, but as a racing fan, I can't imagine going to the track and not seeing horses in person, but 15 or 20,000 people for Saratoga love to have their picnic in the backyard. Bless them. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think the lack of class in the horses is due to the lower amount of foals that have been born over the last couple of years?
Oh, there's a lot less foals being
So
born.
we're going deeper into the
Yeah,
pool of available.
The economics of the game is really undergoing a radical change. I will be close with what I'm going to say. The foal crop, meaning the horses that are born, of the year 2000, so they're the year 2020, so the 2-year-olds now, I'm going to guess is around 19,500. 25 years ago, that number was 40,000. So filling races is getting harder. The economics of racing are driving people out for obvious reasons. It's going to be tougher right now. The ones who are committed, we love them dearly, and maybe this is the type of change that has to happen anyways. I don't know. But yeah, the numbers are way down, and filling races is very hard. There's a race, I think tomorrow or Saturday at Belmont. It's a grade 1 for filly and mares on the grass. It's got 5 horses in it running for $400,000. Which means 5th and 6th place money just to give it back to the the track.
That's
And Charlie knows this because he's an owner. I mean, you know, I don't get that, but
all.
it's what it is. It's what it is. Yeah. Yes. No, I had, there was another in there before I go to you. Okay, go ahead, Jude. Yeah.
Well, you know, I guess the only offset to that is that every 2 or 3 years, you hear of another track closing. We went to a track outside of Chicago 5, 10 years, well, 15 years ago, which was beautiful. I forget the name of it.
Arlington.
Yeah, Arlington. They just closed this year.
It's
And
tragic.
then other tracks closed. And some, you go down to Delaware Park. I don't know how they stay in business. So some of the casino money, I don't know if it's good or bad. So the casino money gives it to these smaller tracks, or all the tracks, I guess, get some casino money.
Stadium.
And then they tend to hold on, and because they're holding on, there's less horses available for elsewhere, and so it's a problem.
It's a catch-22 that I was active and involved in the coming of this casino to Saratoga Raceway. This is what I have to say about that. And I don't know if it's, on balance, to me, it's good. The casino came to Saratoga Raceway, I'm gonna guess 2003, 2001, 2002, 2003. So if you were a harness fan and you went to the harness races, and I did, I loved it, still do. On a 10 race card before the casino arrived, the owners and trainers and drivers at Saratoga Raceway were racing for a grand total of 8 races at $600 a race, which is $4,800. The feature might have been $2,000, so the purses for the night were $6,800. Probably didn't cover the cost of feeding the horse and having a bet, but that was the reality of it, okay? When the casino came, the very next year, average purses per night went to 100. I say those guys that are invested in racing deserve every bit of it. Now, the fear in casino racetracks is that legislatures desperate for more revenue will start taking more percentage of the casino back. They can. But the deal at the start, for those of you who are interested, I don't mean to bore you, the deal at the start for the casinos to arrive, I think the tracks and the fans made a good deal. Because when New York legislated allowed, remember what they called video lottery terminals, VLTs? When the state allowed that is, let's bring some different gambling to New York. There were 2 places to put the VLTs. You could put them at the track, cut a deal with the track, or you could go out and build a brick and mortar place where the VLTs were. It was a no-brainer. The state says to the track, if you let us put them there, we'll give you a part of the proceeds. It was a great deal. It really was. And you know, whether or not you like harness racing, and that's fine, I think it's an asset to Saratoga Springs. If you go over there, the place is spotless, food is pretty good, racing is really good if you're a harness fan. And to me, we saved another Saratoga property. I think on balance it was good. Now down the road, whether the lawmakers decide to take more away, that I don't know and can't predict. It is happening around the country. Yes.
I know, you know, 40, 50 years ago, we had racing families. I mean, the Whitneys and the
Yeah.
Phillips, whatever, who had the money to wait for a horse
Yes.
to be ready to race. Now we have these groups that come together, they throw the money into the pot, and they want to return on their money quickly.
Yeah.
Is that also contributing to the black class?
On balance, and I don't mean to offend my dear friend here, on balance, probably in a lot of places it's a negative because, and it's not a negative because of people who want to own horses. We want every single one of them more than ever. The negative is many people get in and don't realize how much it's going to cost. They find out very quickly that, you know, I'm not going to be there on the TV on the first Saturday in May in the Kentucky Derby. I might spend $100 million to get that done. And they get sold the idea that, you know, well, all you have to do is come up with, you know, $500 a month and you're a horse owner. There's privileges that go with that. On the bigger question, your question really is addressing what has that done to the breed? I know from firsthand, because of the way I grew up, that these people, some of them I mentioned here, they were pretty serious. They were pedigree experts. They were confirmation experts. I mean, you know, they wouldn't send a mare to a stallion who wasn't built the way the stallion should have been, and the mare who they thought couldn't carry the foal properly. And the other thing about those days is they had the wisdom to, if they owned a stallion, pretty much before the era we're talking about, I've had a cutoff date, I'll say 1964, comment on that in a minute. Your stallion was only going to be bred 40 times a year. Now it's 200 plus. I have a biology teacher in the front row here that has something to do with fertility when you do that. Okay, so you know there's some downside to that too. But new owners are completely, totally, utterly welcome. But it depends upon who the manager of the group is and whether or not that particular person really has the best. And the best interests of racing are expensive. That's a great question, really. I mean, it's everybody in racing who really gets the picture is concerned about what you're talking about. You know, and we probably did retire way too many horses for stud duty. Can anybody in this audience name the horse that made this happen? This explosion of breeding value? No, before him. It was a horse in Canada called Northern Dancer. And Northern Dancer was magnificent. He was from a great sire line. If I could show you a picture of one horse that I thought was the most beautifully built horse I ever looked at, his sire NYRA, okay? But Northern Dancer was a Canadian who came down here, won the Derby, went up and won the Queen's Plate in Canada. He was priceless. I got to see him before he died. I went to Winfield Farms in Canada. In 1965, he went to stud. His first crop meaning the horses that were born from his mares, were so successful that in 67 or 68, think of that, in those dollars, he was syndicated for $1 million per share. At 40 shares, he brought $40 million to Winfield's farm. And for the $1 million, you got to send one mare to him. And if you didn't own a mare, you paid $1 million to send your mare to him. He's the one that started it. He was a genetic masterpiece. It's starting to back off a little, 40 years later, but that started the thing that you're talking about. I'll never forget it. I got to see him. It's beautiful. Others?
What's
Yes,
your
sir.
opinion on the new universal laws for all tracks?
HISA, Horse Racing Integrity and Safety
Yeah.
Act. On balance, good. If we can get some semblance of bringing together the 30 or 31 states that conduct racing and have some sort of uniform rules, it's going to be good for racing. The people inside of racing are a little worried about, are we giving power to people who eventually will not understand it? And I think they should go toward HISA and see how that works, because even if you just follow racing remotely, a track can say to an owner or trainer, we're kicking your horses out. We have evidence that you're doing something illicit. And another track who wants them can say, come on in. I think we got to stop that. And I think we're moving in that direction. The most notable recent event of the case being, of course, Bob Baffert, who, by the way, is a tremendous horseman. Make no mistake about it. But stuff happened, which I'm very sorry for him and his team, because they're good. And he's always promoted the game. And, from a horseman's point of view, I think he knows what he's doing. He's really an outstanding horseman, but he's got to pay this price, no question. Because the trainer is, the ultimate insurer is called the trainer. Whatever goes on in the barn is up to you as a trainer. And whether or not you're aware of it, you better be aware of it. And you can't do it any other way. Good questions today. Really good questions.
I thought it was actually, my memory was 2012, something happened in terms of control by the states. I think that was when Charlie Hayward got the CEO at the time, Charlie Hayward.
Yeah, well, it was in Charlie's tenure that the NYRA sold its properties. I think that's what you're referring to. I believe in 2012, he may have gotten in trouble for the gambling. But he was the president when NYRA, and of course, it's a whole board decision, it's not just Charlie. But, and, you know, he was the president when that happened, you know. And you know, there's powerful people, they did what they thought was best, but I'm very sorry that Saratoga is not private in some way. I really am. Keeneland's private. Woodbine is private. Oaklawn is private. If you're only a casual racing fan, go look up the business that's being done at Oaklawn Park. Give you a quick case in point. In Churchill. 2-year-old race at Saratoga. It'll be worth more than the one at Belmont, although it really shouldn't be, but 2-year race at Saratoga might open with 2-year-old fillies and colts going 5 furlongs. It'll be first for $90,000. That very same race at Oaklawn Park will be $127,000. And that very same race at Churchill Downs will be $125,000. It's actually what's happening today. I'm told, I'm not as active as I used to be, but there are a significant number of owners and trainers who are going to leave horses in Kentucky this summer because purses are so good. That'll mean fewer coming to Saratoga. Will it make a difference? I can't say, but Saratoga is nirvana, okay, it is. But the reality of what's going on right now is some people are going to say, I got to stay home this summer. I don't want to know what diesel fuel is going to cost this summer to bring horses out of the van. I really don't, but you know, I want to be wrong about all this, but it's just going to be a tough year.
How are they funding the purses? Is there some subsidy going on?
Well, Churchill had the very, very smart decision to take control of its own, well, for lack of a better term, its own lottery and sports gambling. It's through Churchill Downs. They have their own outlet that they own, and so the profits from that go into the purses. And besides, business is just great there. I mean, the racing is terrific. Oaklawn is probably the richest daily purse in the country. Churchill will be second. Santa Anita is falling far behind. New York is probably third. And Saratoga, they will boost up as they have to. But that's the background of purses. It's phenomenal. And if you own it, you're not sharing it with anybody. And they're doing it. And in Churchill, have you been?
Yeah.
They do a fabulous job.
You know, all those tracks. The only thing is Oaklawn is not that pretty.
I haven't been. Yeah.
It's not that pretty.
Yeah, but
Keeneland is fabulous.
Oh my God, Keeneland is, it's, every now and then they threaten to run all summer. That'll really get into us. Charlie has a question.
Hey, just a quick one, on Mama. Wasn't there an underwriting by their legislature, especially the Undermont Board, to support the Haskell?
You're probably more up on it than I am, so I'm gonna say you're right, but what happened in Monmouth, I think, you may know better than me. I think the Horsemen a few years ago bought controlling interest in the track. I think it's owned in majority by the owners and trainers. I'd almost make a bet on that. But I have a feeling the legislature they really need to help the Haskell. I mean, there's only so many $1 million grade ones in the summer, and as you pointed out earlier, the number of horses is dwindling. Got to save the Haskell. It's a great crop for the drivers for one. We got to keep it. Yeah. Others, sure.
Yeah, the thing about Aqueduct and the fund, I hear that casino there, and it's a casino. I've never been to the casino.
Okay.
I guess it's VLT's own, the slot machines.
Yeah.
It's the largest grossing casino on the A train with 8 million people live in New York City. No other place has that many population. It doesn't include visits. That money is going, I don't know what type of deal they arrange, but money has to be going to NYRA from.
Oh, it is.
It's got to be huge money.
It's so huge that it's actually funding Saratoga. That's how huge it is.
So why would they need to fund Saratoga? I mean, with the prices they charge to get in and mission, and
your point is perfectly taken, but I've been to Genting. I know the numbers. Genting's numbers are idiotic. I would say probably, well, when Genting opened, whatever year it was, I went down there for it. My numbers are fuzzy, but this will put it in perspective. At that time, their win per machine was $880 per day. They probably got 5,000 machines there. Okay, it's massive. That was then. The win's probably over $1,000 a machine. Think the win in Saratoga, which is marvelous, is 200 or 300. Genting is, I mean, they want the track because they want their hotel and they want to be connected to the airport down there across the conduit, to the airport there. Their grand plan is the track is gone, we build our hotel here. They've even got they've got at the top of the stretch, they've got you can see that they're ready to build a ramp so that you can drive off the turnpike from Belmont to Aqueduct and just get off the road and drive right into the garage and then go to the casino and the hotel. Genting is incredible. If that's your interest, But they saved Aqueduct. Can't say they haven't. Eventually they'll take it, I think.
But you implied that, this is interesting, you implied that Saratoga operates a loss. They're subsidizing Saratoga. I mean, I would think,
Saratoga Racetrack?
yeah,
No. Saratoga Racetrack is probably the one that is the only of the three tracks.
right, I thought you mentioned that they subsidize Saratoga.
Oh, yeah, no, their purse money goes into all three tracks. It's not just Aqueduct. NYRA benefits from the whole thing.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, it's not just Aqueduct. I mean, if it all went to Aqueduct, it wouldn't be a Saratoga. Like economically, people would be here for the beauty, but I'd hate to know what purses would be worth there. Yeah. No, that's the deal. Yeah. Sorry I implied it. Sure.
Just one more question.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Who's going to win the Belmont?
I'll tell you who I'm gonna bet. I'm gonna bet a filly named Nest.
Yes.
I love her. I bet her in the Ashland. I think she'll go that far. I have really conflicting feelings about Rich Strike. But if Todd is gonna run Nest in the Belmont, that's enough for me. She'll get the distance, whether or not she'll beat others getting the distance, I don't know, but that's who I like, and I'm gonna make it real simple. I'm just gonna play her. I'm not gonna spread out to a whole lot
I
of
believe
bets.
the favorite is a horse on the rail called
We the People.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won the Peter Pan, and that's a huge credit because the Peter Pan is a great lead for the Belmont. It has been for a long time. Yeah. She's good, she really is, but thank you very much for having me today. I enjoyed it.